The fever came first, burning through Kendra Zimmerman's body like wildfire across dry prairie grass. And she knew with terrible certainty that she would die in this God-forsaken New Mexico territory town called Aztec if someone did not help her soon. The October wind of 1883 cut through her threadbare traveling dress as she stumbled down the dusty main street, her carpetbag dragging in the dirt, her vision swimming with each labored step. She had been running for 3 weeks, ever since her stepfather sold her to a mining company owner in Denver to settle his gambling debts, and somewhere between Colorado and this high desert landscape, her body had simply given up the fight. The cough started 2 days ago, wet and rattling, and now every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Through blurred eyes, she saw a figure approaching on horseback, tall and broad-shouldered against the dying light. She tried to call out, but the cough seized her again, doubling her over. Her knees hit the ground hard and she tasted copper in her mouth. "Madam," the voice was deep, concerned. Strong hands caught her before she could collapse completely. "Madam, can you hear me?" Kendra tried to focus on the face above her. Dark hair, several days' worth of stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds. Young, maybe late 20s. A rancher judging by his worn leather vest and the dirt under his fingernails. "Please," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Sick, need help." The man did not hesitate. He swept her up into his arms like she weighed nothing, and she was vaguely aware of him calling out instructions to someone about fetching the doctor and bringing his horse. Then the world tilted sideways, and darkness claimed her. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, soft sheets. The smell of sage and wood smoke, a cool cloth on her forehead, voices speaking in low tones. "Fever's at 104, Blake. This girl needs more than what I can do for her here. She needs a hospital in Santa Fe. Then I will take her." That is 3 days' hard ride, and she might not survive the journey. Better to keep her still, let the fever break here if it is going to. What are her chances? A pause. Maybe 50-50. That cough sounds like pneumonia. Lungs are full of fluid. She is young, though strong. That counts for something. Kendra wanted to tell them she was not strong, that she had nothing left to fight with, but her body would not obey. The darkness pulled her back under. Time lost all meaning. Sometimes she was burning, throwing off blankets she could not remember being covered with. Other times she shook so violently her teeth chattered, and she felt more blankets piled on top of her, felt that deep voice murmuring reassurances. She dreamed of her mother, dead these past 12 years, reaching out hands Kendra could never quite grasp. She dreamed of running, always running, through endless corridors with no doors. Once she woke to find the rancher Blake. The doctor had called him sitting beside the bed, reading aloud from a book. His voice was soothing, though she could not make out the words. She tried to speak to thank him, but the cough tore through her again. He was there immediately, helping her sit up, holding a cup of water to her cracked lips. "Easy now," he said. "Small sips. That is it." The water was cool and sweet. She managed 3 swallows before her strength gave out. "Where am I?" The words came out as a rasp. "My ranch, about 5 miles outside Aztec. You collapsed in town 4 days ago. 4 days. She had lost 4 entire days. "You should not have brought me here," she whispered. "The man chasing me, if he finds me." Blake's jaw tightened. "Nobody is going to hurt you here. You have my word on that." She wanted to tell him his word meant nothing against Harold Gresham and his hired men, that the mining company owner would not stop until he got what he paid for, but the effort of speaking had exhausted her. Her eyes drifted closed again. "Rest now," Blake said, and she felt his hand, rough and calloused, briefly touch her forehead. "You are safe." She did not believe him, but she was too tired to argue. The next time she woke, Pale morning light was filtering through simple muslin curtains. Her head felt clearer, though her chest still ached with each breath. She was in a small but tidy bedroom, the furniture handmade but well crafted. A pitcher of water sat on the bedside table along with a bowl of what looked like broth, now cold. Kendra pushed herself up slowly, her arms trembling with the effort. She was wearing a nightgown that was not hers, clean and white with small embroidered flowers at the collar. Someone had bathed her, changed her clothes, tended to her with intimate care. The thought made her flush with embarrassment. The door creaked open and Blake entered carrying a tray. He stopped when he saw her sitting up and something like relief crossed his face. "You are awake, really awake this time. How long?" she asked. 6 days total. The fever broke yesterday evening. He set the tray down and poured fresh water into a glass. Doctor said it was touch and go for a while there. She accepted the water gratefully, noting the steadiness of her hands this time. "You have been taking care of me. Me and Maria, my housekeeper." She handled the more personal aspects. He pulled up a chair. "Do you feel up to eating something? Maria made chicken broth." "I should go." Kendra looked around for her clothes, her bag. "I have already imposed on you too long. You are not going anywhere." His tone was firm but not unkind. "Doctor says you need at least 2 weeks of rest before you can even think about traveling. Maybe longer, given how weak you still are." "I cannot stay here 2 weeks. It is not proper and I have no way to pay you. I am not asking for payment." Blake ladled broth into a bowl. "And as for propriety, Maria lives here full-time as chaperone. My ranch hand Pedro and his wife Rosa have a house about 100 yards from the main house. There are plenty of eyes around to preserve your reputation." Kendra took the bowl he offered, her stomach suddenly reminding her it had been days since she had eaten anything substantial. The broth was rich and flavorful, and she had to force herself to eat slowly. "Why are you doing this?" she asked between spoonfuls. "You do not know me. I could be anyone." Blake was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying her. "When I was 17, my younger sister Clara got sick with scarlet fever. Our parents had died the year before in a wagon accident, and it was just the two of us on our little farm in Kansas. I did not know what to do, had no money for a doctor. A traveling preacher and his wife found us, took Clara in, nursed her for 3 weeks until she recovered. They saved her life." His voice grew softer. "Clara died 2 years later anyway, different illness, but those extra 2 years meant everything to me. So when I see someone sick and alone, I remember how that preacher and his wife did not ask questions, did not expect anything in return. They just helped because it was the right thing to do." The simple honesty in his words made Kendra's throat tighten. "I am sorry about your sister. It was a long time ago. 10 years this past spring." He stood, moving toward the door. "I will let you eat in peace. Call out if you need anything. I will be just down the hall." After he left, Kendra finished the broth and lay back against the pillows, her mind racing despite her body's exhaustion. She needed to leave, to keep moving before Harold Gresham's men tracked her here. But Blake was right about one thing. In her current condition, she would not make it a mile down the road before collapsing again. She was trapped by her own weakness, dependent on the kindness of a stranger who had no idea what kind of danger she might bring to his doorstep. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended peace. Kendra's strength returned slowly. Blake brought her meals 3 times a day, and they fell into an easy pattern of conversation. She learned that he was 28, that he had built his ranch from nothing over the past 5 years, running cattle and breeding horses. He had a quick mind and a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh even when she did not mean to. Maria, A kindly Mexican woman in her 50s fussed over Kendra like a mother hen, bringing her extra blankets and sweet rolls and clucking disapprovingly whenever Kendra tried to do too much too soon. She spoke limited English, but her warmth transcended language barriers. On the 8th day, Kendra felt well enough to leave the bedroom. She made her way slowly down the hall, one hand against the wall for support, and found herself in a modest but comfortable main room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with simple furniture arranged around it. Everything was clean and orderly, though clearly the home of a working man with little time for decorative touches. Blake looked up from a desk in the corner where he had been working on ledgers. Surprise crossed his face, followed quickly by concern. "Should you be out of bed?" "I am going insane staring at those four walls," Kendra said. "I needed to move." He crossed to her in a few long strides, offering his arm. "At least sit by the fire. You are still pale as a ghost." She let him guide her to a chair near the hearth, hating how much she needed his support. Once she was settled, he draped a blanket over her lap. "You are very bossy," she observed. "You are very stubborn," he countered, but there was amusement in his eyes. "Would you like some coffee or tea if you prefer? Coffee would be wonderful." He poured her a cup from a pot on the stove, then settled into the chair across from her with his own mug. The fire crackled between them, and for a while they sat in comfortable silence. "You have not asked me why I was alone in Aztec," Kendra said finally, "or where I was going." "I figured you would tell me if you wanted to. What if I am running from the law? What if I robbed a bank or killed someone?" Blake's lips twitched. "Did you?" "No, but you did not know that. You do not strike me as the bank-robbing type." He took a sip of coffee. "But you are running from something. Or someone." Kendra stared into her cup, watching the dark liquid swirl. She had not told anyone the full truth about her situation, had barely admitted it to herself. But something about Blake's steady presence made her want to trust him. "My stepfather sold me," she said quietly, "like cattle to settle a gambling debt." The silence that followed was sharp and brittle. When she looked up, Blake's face had gone hard, anger simmering in his eyes. "Tell me," he said, his voice carefully controlled. So she did. She told him about her mother's death when she was 10, how her father remarried a year later to a woman named Margaret who had a brother, Frank, how her father died when Kendra was 15, and Margaret had disappeared a month later, leaving Kendra in Frank's care. How Frank had drunk and gambled away every cent her father left, then started borrowing from dangerous men. How 3 weeks ago, a man named Harold Gresham had shown up with papers stating that Kendra was now his property, payment for Frank's $20,000 debt. "I ran that night," she said. "Took what little money I had hidden and just ran. I bought a ticket to Santa Fe, but I did not have enough money to make it all the way. I got off in Aztec, thought maybe I could find work, earn enough to keep going. That was when I realized I was sick." Blake was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripped tight around his coffee cup. "This Harold Gresham. What kind of man is he? Rich? Powerful? He owns 3 silver mines in Colorado, and he is not the type to let go of something he thinks belongs to him." Kendra set down her cup, her hands shaking slightly. "I need to leave before he tracks me here. I will not bring trouble to your door after everything you have done for me." "You are not bringing trouble. He is." Blake leaned forward, his gaze intense. "And you are not leaving until you are fully recovered. I meant what I said, Kendra. You are safe here." "You cannot know that." "Yes, I can. Because I will not let anyone take you against your will. I do not care how rich or powerful this man thinks he is." The certainty in his voice sent a strange warmth through her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this small ranch in the middle of New Mexico territory could somehow be sanctuary. But she had learned the hard way that hope was a dangerous thing. 2 more days passed, and Kendra grew stronger. She started helping Maria in the kitchen despite their protests, needing to feel useful to earn her keep in some small way. She learned that Blake ran a crew of 4 ranch hands in addition to Pedro. They were out on the range most days, managing the cattle and horses, but they came in for supper every evening, filling the modest house with rough laughter and easy camaraderie. Pedro and his wife Rosa lived in a small adobe house within shouting distance of the main house. Rosa was heavily pregnant with their 3rd child, and Kendra found herself drawn to the young woman's quiet strength. They spent an afternoon together while Rosa taught her how to make tortillas, their hands working the dough in comfortable rhythm. "Mr. Blake is good man," Rosa said in her accented English. "He helped Pedro when no one else would. Give him job, house, respect. He helped you too because that is who he is." "He has done more than I had any right to ask," Kendra said. Rosa gave her a knowing look. "He looks at you different." "I see it. He is just being kind, is more than kind, but you will see." Kendra did not know what to make of that, so she changed the subject. But Rosa's words lingered in her mind, and she found herself noticing things she had tried to ignore. The way Blake's face softened when he looked at her. How he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire. The small gestures, like bringing her wildflowers he claimed to have just stumbled across, or reading aloud in the evenings because he remembered her saying she missed books. On the 12th day, Blake announced he needed to ride into Aztec for supplies and asked if she felt strong enough to join him. Kendra agreed, eager to escape the confines of the ranch, even though part of her worried about being seen in town. She borrowed a riding dress from Maria's daughter, who was closer to her size, and let Blake help her up onto a gentle mare named Daisy. The ride into town took just over an hour. The New Mexico landscape spread out around them in shades of red and gold, the October air crisp and clean. Blake pointed out landmarks as they rode, and Kendra found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the vast sky above. She had been running for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist in a moment without fear. Aztec was a small town, maybe 300 people, built along the Animas River. The main street boasted a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. Blake tied up their horses outside the general store and helped Kendra down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. Inside, the store smelled of leather and tobacco and coffee beans. Blake moved through the aisles with purpose, selecting items and chatting easily with the proprietor, a balding man named Mr. Henderson. Kendra wandered to the dry goods section, admiring fabric she could not afford and trying not to think about how empty her pockets were. "See something you like?" She turned to find Blake behind her, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. "Just looking," she said. "Everything is lovely." He reached past her and pulled down a bolt of deep blue calico the color of twilight. "This would suit you." "Blake, I cannot consider it payment for all the help you have been giving Maria in the kitchen. She told me you have been doing more than your share." He carried the fabric to the counter before she could protest further. They were leaving the store, Blake's arms full of packages, when a voice called out from across the street. "Well, well. Blake Kennedy, I heard you were harboring a strange woman out at your ranch." Kendra's blood went cold. She turned to see a man standing outside the saloon, tall and lean with a face like a rattlesnake. He wore expensive clothes and a gun belt that looked well used. "Thomas," Blake said evenly, "none of your business who stays at my ranch." The man Thomas smiled without warmth. "Funny thing. Got a telegram couple days ago at the hotel. Man named Harold Gresham is looking for a young woman, about 20 years old, blonde hair, traveling alone. offering a $500 reward for information on her whereabouts. His eyes slid to Kendra. "You would not happen to know anything about that, would you, Blake?" Kendra felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Blake's hand found her elbow, steadying her. "I do not know what you are talking about, Thomas. Now, if you will excuse us, we have a long ride home." But Thomas was not done. He stepped into the street, his hand resting casually on his gun. "Now, I am thinking that lady right there matches the description pretty well. $500 is a lot of money, enough to make a man consider sending a telegram of his own. You will not do that." Blake's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Why, she your woman, you got claim on her, she is under my protection. That is all you need to know," Thomas laughed. "Your protection? You are a small-time rancher, Blake. You think that means anything against a man with Harold Gresham's money and connections?" He turned his attention to Kendra. "Why do you not make this easy, sweetheart? Come with me, send that telegram, and save everyone a lot of trouble." Before Kendra could respond, Blake had shifted to put himself between her and Thomas. "Walk away, Thomas, right now. Or what? You going to shoot me in front of all these witnesses?" Thomas gestured to the people who had stopped to watch the confrontation. "Face it, Blake. You are on the wrong side of this. That girl is wanted property and the law is on Gresham's side." "The law does not recognize selling human beings as property," Blake said. "Not anymore. Not for 20 years. That is not what the contract says. Man has a legal claim on debt repayment. Judge is going to side with him every time." Kendra's mind raced. Thomas was right about one thing: the courts would almost certainly side with Gresham. Debt contracts were sacred in the eyes of the law, and a clever lawyer could argue that she was collateral, same as a house or land. She could not let Blake get dragged into this fight. It was not his battle to wage. "It is all right," she heard herself say. "He is right. I should just know." Blake did not take his eyes off Thomas. "You are not going anywhere with him." The standoff stretched out, tense and fragile. Then the door of the general store opened, and Mr. Henderson stepped out with a shotgun cradled in his arms. "Thomas, I think you should move along now," the store owner said mildly. "You are disrupting business." The town sheriff, a grizzled man in his 60s, emerged from the saloon. "Henderson is right. Whatever this is about, it ends now. Thomas, get back to the hotel. Blake, take your lady friend and head on home." Thomas held Blake's gaze for another long moment, then smiled that cold snake smile again. "This is not over. That reward is too good to pass up." He turned and walked back toward the hotel, but Kendra knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Thomas would send that telegram, and Harold Gresham would come. It was only a matter of time. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Blake seemed lost in thought, his jaw tight, and Kendra could not find words adequate to express her gratitude or her guilt. She had brought exactly the kind of trouble she had feared to his doorstep. When they reached the ranch, Blake helped her down from the horse and handed the reins to Pedro, who had come out to meet them. "Take care of them, would you? I need to talk to Miss Zimmerman." He led her into the house, through to a small office she had not seen before. Maps covered one wall, along with what looked like land surveys and legal documents. He gestured for her to sit, then leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "I need you to be honest with me," he said. "This contract between your stepfather and Gresham, do you know what exactly it says?" "I only saw it briefly. It stated that Frank Zimmerman agreed to transfer guardianship of his stepdaughter Kendra Zimmerman to Harold Gresham in exchange for forgiveness of a $20,000 debt. There were dates and signatures and a notary seal. It looked official." "But you are 20 years old, correct? Not a minor." "I am 22. I was 21 when Frank signed that paper." Blake's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "Then the contract is worthless. You cannot transfer guardianship of an adult. Frank had no legal authority over you to sign away. Hope fluttered in Kendra's chest, tentative and fragile. Are you sure? Reasonably sure. I am not a lawyer, but I have dealt with enough contracts over the years to know the basics. An adult woman is legally her own person. Your stepfather had no more right to sell you than he would to sell me or any other grown person. He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. But here is the problem. Gresham either does not know that, or he does and does not care. Men like him are used to getting what they want through intimidation and money. He will come here with hired guns and try to take you by force. The law might technically be on your side, but that will not matter much if he drags you back to Colorado before we can get in front of a judge. So what do I do? Blake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. There is one way to make absolutely certain Gresham has no claim on you. What? Marry me, Kendra's breath caught. What? If you are married, then any contract involving you becomes void. A husband would have legal standing to contest Gresham's claim, and no judge in the territory would side with an outsider over a woman's husband. He held up a hand before she could speak. I know how this sounds. I know we have only known each other less than 2 weeks. But I am not proposing a real marriage, not in the way you are thinking. It would be a legal arrangement, protection on paper. You would have your own room, your own life. When this is all settled and Gresham gives up, you could get an annulment or we could part ways however you want. No obligations. Kendra's mind reeled. The offer was insane, generous beyond measure and completely impractical. But it was also the only viable solution she could see. And beneath her shock, beneath her rational thoughts about the absurdity of marrying a near stranger, there was something else. A whisper of feeling she had been trying to ignore, the warmth that spread through her chest whenever Blake smiled at her, the safety she felt in his presence. Why would you do this? She whispered. You do not owe me anything. This would tie you to me legally, complicate your life in ways you cannot even predict. I know what I am offering. His gray eyes were steady, sincere. And I am offering because it is the right thing to do, because you deserve to be free and safe, and because... He paused, seemed to weigh his words. Because I have come to care about what happens to you, more than I probably should, given the circumstances. The admission hung in the air between them, charged and honest. Kendra's heart hammered against her ribs. If I say yes, if we do this, you need to understand something, she said. I have nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. I cannot offer you anything in return. I am not asking for anything in return. Blake, let me help you, Kendra, please. She looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. He was offering her freedom, safety, protection. He was offering himself as a shield against the darkness that had been chasing her for weeks. How could she say no? How could she say yes? All right, she heard herself say. Yes, I will marry you. Relief washed over Blake's face and he took her hands in his. Thank you. We will ride to Farmington tomorrow, get married by the justice of the peace there. It is safer than doing it in Aztec where Thomas might hear about it. Once we have the marriage certificate, Gresham will have no legal ground to stand on. What if he does not care about legal ground? What if he just tries to take me anyway? Then he will have to go through me, through all of us. Blake squeezed her hands gently. You are not alone anymore, Kendra. Remember that. That night, Kendra lay awake in the small bedroom that had become her sanctuary, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the enormity of what she had agreed to. Tomorrow, she would marry Blake Kennedy, a man she had known for 12 days. It did not matter that the marriage would be in name only, that it was a practical solution to a dangerous problem. The weight of it still pressed down on her chest, mingling with other feelings she could not quite name. She thought about Blake's words. I have come to care about what happens to you. More than I probably should. Did she feel the same? Yes, she realized. Somewhere between the fever dreams and the quiet conversations by the fire, between the wildflowers and the easy laughter, she had started to care for him too. Perhaps it was just gratitude, the natural affection of someone saved toward their rescuer. Or perhaps it was something more. She did not let herself examine that thought too closely. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Maria helped Kendra dress in the best clothes she had. The blue calico Blake had bought made up quickly into a simple dress. Rosa braided her hair and tucked wildflowers into it, tears in her eyes even though Kendra tried to explain it was not a real wedding. Not really. Blake wore his Sunday best, a dark suit that made him look even more handsome than usual. He helped her into the wagon, and they set off for Farmington with Pedro and Maria as witnesses. The ride took most of the morning, following the river through countryside that seemed to glow gold in the autumn light. The justice of the peace was a portly man named Judge Morrison who did not ask questions, just had them sign the necessary papers and spoke the familiar words. Do you, Blake Kennedy, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you, Kendra Zimmerman, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Kendra heard herself say, I do, heard Blake say the same. The judge pronounced them husband and wife, and Blake kissed her on the cheek, brief and chaste. They signed the marriage certificate, and just like that, it was done. She was Kendra Kennedy now, protected by law and by the man standing beside her. On the ride back, reality began to sink in. She kept glancing at the ring on her finger, a simple gold band Blake had produced from his pocket. It fit perfectly, and she wondered if it had belonged to his mother or sister, some piece of family history she was now part of, even temporarily. Are you all right? Blake asked quietly. Maria and Pedro were chatting in Spanish in the back of the wagon, giving them a semblance of privacy. I think so. It is just strange. This morning I was one person, and now I am someone else entirely. You are still you, Blake said. The name and the paper, they do not change who you are inside. Maybe not, but they change everything else. She turned to look at him. Do you regret it now that it is done? No. His answer was immediate and firm. Do you, Kendra, considered the question honestly? No, I am grateful. I just hope I do not end up being more trouble than I am worth. That is not possible. Blake's hand found hers, squeezed briefly, then let go. We will get through whatever comes next, together. That word together settled something inside her. For so long, she had been alone, making decisions in isolation, running with no one to rely on. Now she had someone beside her, someone who had chosen to stand with her against whatever storm was coming. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. They reached the ranch in late afternoon. The ranch hands were out on the range, but Rosa had prepared a special supper to celebrate, and when Pedro told the crew about the wedding, they insisted on an impromptu party. Someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and before long the modest house was filled with music and laughter. Blake danced with Kendra in the firelight, spinning her around the main room while the others clapped and cheered. He was a surprisingly good dancer, and she found herself laughing breathlessly, caught up in the moment. For a little while, she could almost forget the circumstances that had brought them here, could almost believe this was a real wedding celebration for a couple truly in love. When the music slowed, Blake pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and when she looked up at him, something in his expression made her breath catch. The laughter had faded from his eyes, replaced by something deeper, more serious. Thank you, she said softly, for all of this, for everything. You do not have to keep thanking me. I do, though. You have given me back my life." Blake's hand tightened on her waist. "Kendra, I need you to know something. When I said this marriage did not have to be real, I meant it. I will not press you for anything you do not want to give. But I also need you to know that my feelings for you are real. I did not marry you just out of duty or kindness." Her heart stuttered. "Blake, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide, however you want this arrangement to work, I will respect it. But I could not let another day go by without being honest about where I stand." Before Kendra could formulate a response, Pedro called out that more food was ready, and the moment fractured. Blake stepped back, his hand falling away from her waist, and she felt the loss of his warmth immediately. The party continued into the evening, but Kendra's mind was elsewhere, turning over Blake's words. He had feelings for her, real feelings. And if she was honest with herself, she had feelings for him too. But was it love or just gratitude and proximity? How could she trust her own emotions when everything in her life had been turned upside down? When the celebration finally wound down and the ranch hands headed back to the bunkhouse, Kendra found herself alone with Blake in the quiet house. Maria had discreetly retired to her small room off the kitchen, leaving them standing awkwardly in the main room. "I should let you get some rest," Blake said. "It has been a long day." "Blake, wait." Kendra caught his sleeve. "About what you said earlier, you do not have to address it now. I should not have brought it up on today of all days, but I want to address it." She took a breath, trying to find the right words. "I care about you too, more than I expected to, more than makes sense given how little time we have known each other, but I am also terrified. The last time I trusted someone, my stepfather sold me to a stranger. The man before that, my father, died and left me vulnerable. I do not have a good track record with men, and I do not know if I am capable of—" She paused, struggling. "I do not know if I can be what you need." Blake's expression softened. "All I need is honesty, time, a chance for us to figure out what this is between us without pressure or expectations. Can you give me that?" "Yes," Kendra said. "I can do that." He smiled then, real and warm, and lifted her hand to press a kiss to her knuckles. "Then that is enough for now. Good night, Kendra Kennedy." "Good night, Blake." She lay awake again that night, but this time her thoughts were different. She was not running anymore. She had a home, at least for now. She had protection and safety and people who cared about her. And she had Blake, complicated and confusing as her feelings for him might be. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Kendra continued helping Maria with household tasks, but she also started spending more time outside, learning about the ranch operations. Blake taught her to ride better, to identify different types of cattle, to read the weather in the shape of clouds on the horizon. They talked constantly about everything and nothing, his dreams for expanding the ranch, her childhood memories before everything fell apart, books they had read, places they wanted to see. She learned that Blake had a subtle wit that caught her off guard, making her laugh at unexpected moments. She learned that he was methodical and thoughtful, planning everything carefully but willing to adapt when circumstances changed. She learned that he was kind to his employees, generous with neighboring ranchers who hit hard times, and fiercely protective of the people he cared about. And with each passing day, her feelings for him grew clearer, less tangled up in gratitude and fear. She was falling in love with her husband, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. 2 weeks after the wedding, the storm they had been bracing for finally arrived. Kendra was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats. 6 men rode up the drive, and even from a distance, she recognized the man in the lead. Harold Gresham was in his 40s, handsome in a cold, calculating way, dressed in expensive riding clothes that looked out of place in the dusty ranch yard. Blake must have heard them too because he appeared from the barn, Pedro and two other ranch hands flanking him. He positioned himself between Kendra and the approaching riders. "Harold Gresham, I presume," Blake said evenly. Gresham reined in his horse and looked Blake up and down dismissively. "And you must be Blake Kennedy, the man foolish enough to interfere in my business. I will give you one chance to step aside and hand over what belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. You are trespassing on my land. That girl is mine by legal contract. I have every right to retrieve my property." "That woman is my wife," Blake said, his voice hard as iron. "And she is not your property or anyone else's. You have no claim on her." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Gresham's face. "Your wife, married 2 weeks ago, legal and binding, which means your worthless contract with her stepfather is void." Blake pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Here is the marriage certificate, signed and witnessed. You want to contest it, take it up with a judge." Gresham's face flushed with anger. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop me? I paid $20,000 for her. I am not leaving without what I am owed." "Then I will pay you back the $20,000, Blake said. Kendra gasped, but Blake did not look at her. "Give me 6 months to raise the capital, and I will buy out your bogus contract. Every cent you paid Frank Zimmerman, I will match it." "I do not want money," Gresham spat. "I want her. She was promised to me, and I keep what is mine." One of Gresham's men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun. Immediately, the ranch hands tensed, and Kendra saw that Pedro was armed, as were the others. The air crackled with potential violence. "Let me make this very clear," Blake said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Kendra Kennedy is not leaving this ranch unless she chooses to. You or your men make any move to take her, and you will have a fight on your hands. And before you calculate your odds, understand that I have 6 more men working the north pasture who can be here in 10 minutes if I fire a shot. The people of Aztec know you are here, know why you came. If violence breaks out, it will not go well for you legally or otherwise." Gresham's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring in his expression. His eyes slid past Blake to where Kendra stood frozen by the laundry line. "Is that what you want?" he called to her. "To be shackled to some dirt-poor rancher in the middle of nowhere? I can give you a mansion, servants, everything money can buy. I can give you a life of luxury." Kendra found her voice, though it shook. "I do not want your luxury. I do not want anything from you. I choose to stay here with my husband. That is my decision as a free woman." "You would have been free with me too," Gresham said. "Taken care of, protected, owned," Blake interrupted. "The word you are looking for is owned, and that is never going to happen." The standoff stretched out, seconds feeling like hours. Then Gresham smiled, cold and sharp. "Fine. Keep your little bride. But that $20,000 debt does not just disappear, Kennedy. If you want to buy her freedom, I will hold you to that. 6 months, you said. I will be back in 6 months with a lawyer and legal papers. You better have my money, or I will take everything you own to settle the debt. This ranch, your cattle, every last stick of furniture in that house." "I will have it," Blake said. "We will see." Gresham wheeled his horse around. "Let's go, boys. The smell of poverty is making me sick." They rode off in a cloud of dust, and Kendra sagged against the fence, her legs suddenly weak. Blake was at her side immediately, his arm around her waist supporting her. "Are you all right? You should not have promised him that money. Blake, $20,000, that is a fortune." "You cannot possibly. I will figure it out," he said firmly. "Come inside. You are shaking." He guided her into the house and settled her by the fire, then poured her a glass of whiskey. "Drink this. For the shock." She obeyed, the liquor burning down her throat and settling warm in her stomach. $20,000. How are you going to raise that kind of money in 6 months? Blake sat down heavily across from her. I have about 4,000 in the bank. The ranch is worth another 10, maybe 12 if I can find the right buyer, but selling it would defeat the purpose. The cattle are worth something, but not enough. I have some horses I could sell, contracts I could call in. He ran a hand through his hair. I will find a way. This is insane. You should not have to pay that debt. It is not even legal. Maybe not, but if it gets Gresham to leave us alone, it is worth it. He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. I meant what I said, Kendra. I am not letting him take you. Even if it costs you everything. You are not everything. You are one person and you are worth protecting. Tears blurred her vision. I do not deserve you. That is not true. He moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands. You deserve to be free and safe and happy. If I can help make that happen, then I will, no matter the cost. Kendra looked down at their joined hands, at the simple gold band on her finger that marked her as his wife. She thought about everything Blake had done for her, from the moment he found her collapsing in the street to this very second. He had asked nothing in return, had given freely and completely, and she realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for him were not born of gratitude or proximity or circumstance. She loved him, truly, deeply loved him. Blake, she whispered, I need to tell you something. He waited, patient as always. I love you, not because you saved me or married me or are protecting me. I love you because you are kind and strong and good, because you make me laugh and make me feel safe, because when I imagine my future, I cannot picture it without you in it. The words tumbled out, urgent and honest. I know this marriage started as a practical arrangement, but I do not want it to stay that way. I want it to be real. I want to build a life with you, here on this ranch. I want Blake cut her off by pulling her down into his arms and kissing her. It was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This kiss was deep and passionate, full of all the feelings they had been dancing around for weeks. Kendra melted into it, her hands tangling in his hair, her heart soaring. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Blake rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, he said. God help me. I have loved you since about the third day you were here, when you were delirious with fever and still trying to apologize for being a burden. I have been trying to give you space and time, but Kendra, I want this to be real too. I want you as my wife in every sense of the word. Then I am yours, she said simply. Completely. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. We are going to figure this out. The money, Gresham, all of it. We will find a way. Together, Kendra said, echoing his word from weeks ago. Together, he agreed. That night, Kendra moved her belongings from the guest room into Blake's room, into the bed they would now share as husband and wife. Their marriage was consummated with tenderness and care, Blake attentive to her inexperience, patient and loving. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, and felt peace settle over her for the first time in longer than she could remember. The next few months were a flurry of activity. Blake threw himself into finding ways to raise money. He sold a portion of his horse herd to a rancher in Colorado, drove his best cattle to market in Santa Fe himself to avoid paying a middleman, and took on contract work breaking horses for the army. Kendra helped in every way she could, taking in sewing and laundry from families in Aztec, selling eggs and butter in town, working alongside Blake from dawn to dusk. It was hard, exhausting work, but they were doing it together, and that made all the difference. In the evenings, they would collapse by the fire, reviewing their finances, calculating and recalculating how close they were to their goal. Pedro and Rosa's baby was born in December, a healthy boy they named Miguel. Kendra helped Rosa through the labor, marveling at the miracle of new life, and when she held the infant afterwards, she felt a longing stir in her own heart. She wanted this someday a child of her own, Blake's child, a family built on love instead of obligation. Christmas came, and though they had little money to spare, Blake surprised her with a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For writing down your thoughts," he said, "or stories or whatever you want. I know you used to like to write before everything happened with your stepfather." She had told him that weeks ago, a passing comment about how she once dreamed of being a writer. She could not believe he remembered. "Blake, this is too much. Nothing is too much for you." She gave him a hand-knitted scarf she had been working on in secret, the wool soft and warm. He wore it every day after that, even when it was not that cold, and the sight of it around his neck made her heart swell. By March, they had scraped together $15,000. It was an incredible achievement, but still $5,000 short of what they needed. Blake grew quieter as the deadline approached, the worry lines around his eyes deepening. "We could try to negotiate with Gresham," Kendra suggested one evening. $15,000 is still a substantial amount. Maybe he would accept it. Men like Gresham do not negotiate, they take. Blake stared into the fire. "I have been thinking about selling the eastern pasture. It is not the best land, but someone might pay $3,000 or $4,000 for it. That is part of your ranch, your future. You are my future, Kendra. The land is just land." She moved to sit beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I hate that you have to make this choice. It is not fair. Life is not fair, but we have each other, and that counts for something." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We will make it work, one way or another." 2 weeks before the 6-month deadline, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was an older man, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone important. Blake met him in the yard, Kendra watching anxiously from the porch. "Mr. Kennedy, my name is Jonathan Wright. I am a lawyer from Denver. I have been looking into the case of Harold Gresham and his various business dealings." Blake's expression turned wary. "What about them? May we speak inside? What I have to tell you is rather sensitive." They gathered in the main room, and Mr. Wright pulled papers from his leather case. "I represent several families whose daughters were also sold to Mr. Gresham under similar circumstances to your wife. In the past 5 years, Gresham has purchased at least 7 young women through debt contracts with their relatives. He presents himself as offering them legitimate employment or marriage, but in reality, he is trafficking them into a very different kind of servitude." Kendra's blood ran cold. "What kind of servitude?" "The kind that involves brothels he owns in 3 different states. Once he has legal custody of these women, he transports them to these establishments and forces them into prostitution." Mr. Wright's expression was grim. "You did not know?" "No," Blake said, his voice tight with fury. He presented himself as wanting to marry Kendra. That is his usual method. By the time the women realize the truth, they are hundreds of miles from home with no legal recourse. Mr. Wright spread the papers on the table. "I have been building a case against him for the past year. Testimonies from women who escaped, documentation of his business operations, evidence of fraud and kidnapping. I am ready to take it to a federal prosecutor, but I needed one more piece: a woman he attempted to acquire who can testify that she escaped and that he pursued her despite having no legal claim." "Kendra," Blake said. "Exactly. If Mrs. Kennedy is willing to testify, her case could be the final nail in Gresham's coffin. He is already facing charges in Colorado, but with her testimony, we can make a federal case that will put him away for decades." Kendra's mind reeled. "What would I have to do?" "Travel to Denver, give a deposition to the prosecutor, and possibly testify in court if the case goes to trial. It would take a few weeks at most. Mr. Kennedy could accompany you, of course. And if we do this, what happens to the $20,000 he claims Blake owes him?" Mr. Wright smiled. If Gresham is arrested on federal charges, that debt becomes null and void. Any contracts associated with his criminal enterprise would be invalidated. You would owe him nothing. Hope, bright and almost painful, flared in Kendra's chest. She looked at Blake, saw the same hope reflected in his eyes. "When do we leave?" Blake asked. The journey to Denver took a week. Blake arranged for Pedro to manage the ranch in their absence, and he and Kendra traveled by train, a luxury they could barely afford but which was necessary for speed. Kendra had never been on a train before, and despite the circumstances, she found herself pressed against the window, watching the landscape roll by in fascination. Blake held her hand throughout the journey, a steady anchor. "Are you nervous about testifying?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But also angry. If what Mr. Wright said is true, if Gresham has been doing this to other women, then he needs to be stopped." "You are very brave." "I do not feel brave. I feel like I am barely holding it together. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite the fear." He squeezed her hand. "I will be right beside you the whole time." In Denver, they met with the federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elizabeth Winters who listened intently as Kendra recounted her story. She told it all: Frank selling her, her flight from Colorado, Blake's protection, Gresham's arrival at the ranch with his demands. By the time she finished, Prosecutor Winters was making rapid notes. "This is excellent," the prosecutor said. "Combined with the other testimonies, we have a very strong case. Mr. Gresham is currently being held on related charges, but with your statement, I can upgrade those to federal kidnapping and trafficking charges. He will not see the outside of a prison for the rest of his life." "What about Frank Zimmerman?" Kendra asked. "My stepfather. Is he facing charges too?" "We are pursuing charges against several individuals who sold women to Gresham. If you want to press charges against Mr. Zimmerman, we can add that to the case." Kendra thought about the man who had raised her after her father's death, who had then betrayed her in the worst possible way. Part of her wanted to see him punished, but another part of her just wanted to move on, to leave that chapter of her life behind completely. "No," she said finally. "I do not want to see him or think about him ever again. Let him live with what he did." Prosecutor Winters nodded. "That is your right. We have enough without his testimony." The trial took place 6 weeks later. Kendra sat in the witness box and told her story to a room full of strangers, her voice shaking but clear. Harold Gresham sat at the defense table, looking smaller and meaner than she remembered, his expensive suit unable to hide the cruel set of his mouth. When the prosecutor asked her why she ran, Kendra looked directly at Gresham. "Because I am not property. Because no one has the right to sell another human being. And because I knew if I stayed, my life would be destroyed." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Gresham was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, and the judge issued an order invalidating all contracts associated with his criminal enterprise. Outside the courthouse, Kendra collapsed into Blake's arms, sobbing with relief. It was over. Truly, finally over. She was free, and they owed nothing to the man who had tried to own her. "Let's go home," Blake murmured against her hair. "Let's go home and build the life we want." They returned to the ranch in late spring when the New Mexico landscape was painted in shades of green and gold. Everything looked the same, yet Kendra felt fundamentally changed. She was not the sick, desperate woman who had stumbled into Aztec 6 months ago. She was stronger now, surer of herself and her place in the world. The ranch thrived over the next year. With the money they had saved for Gresham's debt, Blake was able to buy more cattle, expand the horse breeding operation, and hire 2 additional hands. Kendra started a small business selling preserves and baked goods in Aztec, which grew popular enough that she was supplying 3 stores in the region. Their marriage deepened into something rich and enduring. They had their disagreements. Of course, Blake's stubborn insistence on working himself to exhaustion, Kendra's tendency to take on too many projects at once, but they always talked through their problems, always came back to the foundation of love and respect they had built. In the summer of 1885, Kendra discovered she was pregnant. She told Blake one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and the joy that spread across his face made her heart overflow. "A baby," he whispered, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. "I love you so much, Kendra. You and this baby, you are everything to me." Their son was born in March of 1886, a healthy boy with Blake's gray eyes and Kendra's blonde hair. They named him Thomas Blake Kennedy, and he was perfect in every way. Kendra had never known it was possible to love something as much as she loved that tiny, red-faced infant. Blake was a devoted father from the first moment, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep, off-key voice that somehow always soothed the baby to sleep. Maria was overjoyed to have a baby in the house again, and Rosa's children treated Thomas like a little prince, constantly wanting to help with him. The ranch became even more of a family, all of them bound together by affection and shared purpose. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. They named her Clara Rose, after Blake's sister and Kendra's mother. She was quieter than Thomas had been, but just as perfect, with dark hair and blue eyes that would eventually settle into hazel. Life was not without challenges. There were droughts and cattle diseases, years when money was tight and worry kept them up at night. But they faced everything together, and their love never wavered. On their 10th anniversary, Blake surprised Kendra with a trip to Santa Fe. They left the children with Maria and Rosa, and spent 3 days exploring the city, visiting galleries and eating at restaurants, staying in a hotel that felt impossibly luxurious. On their last evening, as they walked through the plaza at sunset, Blake stopped and turned to her. "Do you remember when I asked you to marry me? I told you it would be a marriage in name only, that you would have your freedom, that you could leave whenever you wanted." "I remember," Kendra said. "I think about that sometimes, about how naive I was. Like I could have you in my life and not fall completely in love with you, like this could ever be anything less than real." He took both her hands. "These 10 years with you have been the best of my life. You have given me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just survival. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." Tears welled in Kendra's eyes. "Blake, I am not done," he said, smiling. "I just wanted to say thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I am stubborn and difficult. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow. That is my promise to you, for as long as we both live." Kendra could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she just kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "You saved my life that day in Aztec. Not just from the fever, but from a future that would have destroyed me. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I did not deserve it. Every good thing in my life exists because you refused to let me leave. So thank you, Blake Kennedy, for being stubborn and kind and mine." They stood there in the plaza as the sun set, holding each other. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of Kendra's desperate flight. Years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new challenges. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses and books in equal measure. Clara was more adventurous, constantly getting into mischief and charming her way out of trouble. In 1892, another son arrived, William, who had his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. The ranch expanded over the years until it was one of the most successful in the region. Blake's reputation as an honest, fair rancher brought him opportunities to serve on the town council, and he worked to improve Aztec, helping to establish a school and a library. Kendra's preserve business grew into a full bakery that she ran with Rosa, employing several women from town. She used the profits to fund education opportunities for girls in the area, remembering her own struggles and wanting to help others avoid the desperation that had nearly destroyed her. They faced sorrows too. Maria passed away when Thomas was 12, and they all mourned the woman who had been like a mother to Kendra, a grandmother to the children. Pedro stayed on at the ranch, now the foreman, and his presence was a comfort, a connection to the early days when their family was just beginning to form. When Kendra was 40, she received word that Frank Zimmerman had died penniless in a Denver flophouse. She felt nothing but a distant sadness for the waste of a life. Blake held her that night as she cried, not for Frank, but for the father she had lost as a girl, for the innocence stolen by circumstances beyond her control. But those dark moments were far outweighed by the light. Thomas married a schoolteacher named Anna when he was 23, and they gave Kendra and Blake their first grandchild, a girl named Kendra Rose. Clara became a nurse, working at a hospital in Albuquerque but visiting often. William stayed on the ranch, loving the land and the animals as much as his father did. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Half the town showed up, filling the house and yard with laughter and music. Blake pulled Kendra onto the makeshift dance floor and they swayed together under the stars, her head on his shoulder, his arms around her waist. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "That day you found me in Aztec, half dead from fever. Do you ever wish you had just ridden past, kept your life simple?" Blake pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes still as sharp and clear as they had been 25 years ago, though his hair was now threaded with silver. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kendra. You and the life we built together. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where you almost lost your ranch paying off a criminal, even that. Especially that, because it showed me what really matters. Not the land or the money, but the people we love and protect." Kendra kissed him softly. "I love you, Blake Kennedy, today and always." "Today and always," he echoed. They danced until the stars wheeled overhead, surrounded by family and friends, their love as strong and sure as it had been in those early, uncertain days when they were just two people trying to find their way forward together. The years ahead brought more joys, more grandchildren, the satisfaction of seeing their children build successful lives, quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of fire and gold. There were sorrows too, losses and disappointments, but Blake and Kendra faced them together, their partnership weathering every storm. When Kendra was 55, she published a book of stories about the early days of Aztec, weaving together history and memory into something beautiful. Blake read every word, his pride in her accomplishments shining from his eyes. The book sold well throughout the territory and beyond, bringing a small measure of fame that Kendra found both flattering and overwhelming. "I am just a rancher's wife who likes to write," she protested when the newspaper in Santa Fe wanted to interview her. "You are so much more than that," Blake said. "You are a survivor, a businesswoman, a mother, a writer. Let people see who you really are." So she did the interview, and more after that, and discovered that sharing her story helped other women who had faced similar struggles. She received letters from across the country, women thanking her for giving voice to their own experiences, for showing that it was possible to build a life after trauma. It became another way she and Blake helped people. Their home was always open to women in need, a way station for those fleeing bad situations or just down on their luck. They provided meals and temporary shelter, connections to jobs or legal help, whatever was needed. It was their way of paying forward the kindness that the traveling preacher had shown Blake's sister all those years ago. On their 30th anniversary, they took another trip to Santa Fe, just the two of them. They walked the same plaza where Blake had declared his love 10 years earlier, marveling at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. 30 years, Kendra said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like no time at all. Do you remember what you were thinking that day I proposed? Blake asked. The real thoughts, not the diplomatic version you told me later. Kendra laughed. I thought you were insane, a generous, kind-hearted lunatic who had no idea what he was getting himself into. And now I think you were the sanest man I ever met, to see something in me worth saving when I could barely see it myself. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for refusing to let me leave, for being stubborn and impossible and exactly what I needed. Any time, Blake said, smiling. Though I hope you are not planning on developing another fever anytime soon. I will do my best to avoid it. They spent another 2 days in the city, then returned to the ranch that had been their home for 3 decades. The house had been expanded over the years, adding rooms for the growing family. But the heart of it remained the same, the main room with its stone fireplace, where Blake had first nursed Kendra back to health, where they had danced at their impromptu wedding party, where they had sat together through countless evenings planning and dreaming, and simply being together. As they grew older, Blake and Kendra gradually handed over the ranch operations to William, who ran things with the same careful attention and integrity his father had modeled. Thomas and his family lived nearby, visiting often. Clara brought her husband and children back to Aztec when she was 40, opening a medical practice in town. Blake's health began to fail when he was 68. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. His joints ached, his breath came shorter, and he tired more easily. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Kendra never dimmed. They spent more time on the porch, watching the land they had built together, holding hands and reminiscing about the years that had brought them from that desperate moment in Aztec to this peaceful present. You have any regrets? Blake asked one evening. Things you wish you had done differently? Kendra thought about it carefully. I wish I had told you I loved you sooner. We wasted those first few months dancing around our feelings when we could have just been honest from the start. I do not think we wasted them. We needed that time to be sure to build trust. It made what came after more solid. He turned to look at her, and even now, after all these years, the love in his eyes made her breath catch. I have no regrets, not one. Every choice, every challenge, every moment led me to you and to this life. I would not change anything. Kendra leaned her head on his shoulder. Me neither. It has been a beautiful life, Blake. Hard sometimes, but beautiful. The best kind of life, he agreed. Blake passed away peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning, 3 months after his 70th birthday. Kendra woke to find him gone, his hand still clasped in hers, a slight smile on his face. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that made breathing difficult, but underneath, it was gratitude for the 42 years they had shared, for every precious day of love and partnership. The funeral brought people from all over the territory. Blake had touched countless lives with his quiet kindness and integrity, and they came to pay their respects and share their stories. Kendra listened to them all, learning things about her husband. She had never known the loans he had made to struggling ranchers and never called in, the young men he had mentored, the families he had helped through hard times. He was a good man, person after person told her, and she smiled through her tears and agreed. Yes, he had been. The very best of men. She stayed on at the ranch, unable to imagine being anywhere else. William and his wife lived in the main house with her, and her grandchildren filled the rooms with noise and laughter. She wrote more, finding solace in putting words on paper, telling stories about Blake and their life together, preserving the memories before time could fade them. On what would have been their 45th anniversary, Kendra made the trip to Santa Fe alone. She walked through the plaza where Blake had told her he loved her, where they had celebrated milestones and simply enjoyed being together. She sat on a bench and pulled out the journal he had given her that first Christmas, now worn and filled with years of thoughts and memories. On a fresh page, she wrote, "My dearest Blake, it has been 3 years since you left me, and not a day goes by that I do not miss you. But I am not writing to tell you about my sadness. I am writing to say thank you. Thank you for finding me that day in Aztec, for refusing to let me leave, for loving me even when I did not know how to love myself. Thank you for every sunrise we watched together, every child we raised, every challenge we faced as partners. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible, and I am so grateful. Wait for me, my love. Wherever you are, wait for me. We are not finished yet. All my love, always and forever, Kendra." She closed the journal and sat in the fading light, feeling Blake's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. The grief would always be there, but so would the joy, the incredible gift of having loved and been loved so completely. Kendra lived another 8 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, to finish 3 more books, to watch the ranch continue to thrive under William's care. She died at 73, surrounded by family, her last words a whispered "Blake" as she reached for a hand only she could see. They buried her next to Blake on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast New Mexico sky they had both loved. The headstones were simple: Blake Kennedy, 1855–1925. Beloved husband, father, friend Kendra Kennedy, 1861–1934. Beloved wife, mother, writer, but those who knew them understood that the real monument to their love was not carved in stone. It was in the thriving ranch they had built, in the children and grandchildren who carried their values forward, in the countless lives they had touched with their kindness and integrity. It was in the story of how a fever and a chance meeting had brought together 2 souls who were meant to find each other, who had built something beautiful from desperation and hope, who had loved each other with a devotion that transcended time and circumstance. And it was in the memories held close by those who remembered how Blake had found Kendra collapsing in the street and refused to let her face her troubles alone, how he had nursed her through fever and protected her from those who would do her harm, how he had offered her his name and his heart and his life, how she had arrived with a cough and a fever and stayed to build forever,